It's nice to be here at WebCamp Zagreb. How are you feeling today? You feel tired or you feel like some energy in the room? Lovely. This is not awkward at all. My name is Tejas. That's pronounced like contagious disease for those of you who find it a little bit of a rare name. But don't worry, I do not have a contagious disease. I will not give you anything besides maybe, hopefully, a good talk. I work at a company called Contiamo, and it's Italian for we count, but it's a German company, so we're kind of confused. And we work with really old companies to help them kind of discover their own data and do like machine learning and AI and these kinds of things. But for me, the value of where I work is these people. Oh my gosh, like they are so friendly and smart and lovely and it's just very nice people. We're not even hiring, I don't think, but I just like them, so I wanted to show you their faces. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. We're here to talk about building mobile experiences. We're going to be here to talk about some ways you can do that with React Native or similar, or we'll look at progressive web apps, which is kind of taking the web by storm. We'll analyze both approaches and see which one might be right for your use case if you decide to build mobile experiences for you or your team or your company. But I have to start by saying we build apps to solve problems. My friend Glenn, where is he? Glenn. There. Look, stand up. Give Glenn a round of applause. Glenn yesterday, appreciate him. Glenn yesterday made an amazing point that I did not steal for this talk. It's original. But still, he made the point that we make apps to solve problems. If you think about it, every app that you use, that you love, that doesn't kind of go stale on your phone, usually solves a problem, right? Tinder solves a problem. You meet people, whatever you're into. Twitter solves the problem of you can spam people with your thoughts. Facebook solves the problem of connecting with. So every app solves a problem. For me, like Google Maps in this city, I would be so lost without it. All the apps solve problems. I built an app to solve a very specific problem. And I built it using React Native. And I considered building it as a progressive web app. And partially implemented it as both, and here's the kind of analysis of it. Now, the problem that I set out to solve, I needed to spend some time, about 5 minutes, telling you about it so that you fully understand what it is. It's a medical problem. So how many of you have heard of this condition, hemophilia? Oh, so many. That's impressive. Right, hemophilia is a medical condition that affects 1 in 20,000 people. And it has varying degrees of severity. But the essence of this condition is a very little known fact. And that fact about human beings is that we bleed all the time. Like literally like when you wake up in the morning and walk to the shower, you start to bleed into your knees, but you don't notice because it stops very fast. If you've carried a backpack, you've started to bleed into your shoulders and into your elbows. Tiny little blood vessels under the skin will break and you'll bleed. And if you have this condition, you lose a lot of blood and you die very easily. And I don't mean to get dark here. This is just science. There are people I know, friends of mine, who are now, they're living in a wheelchair because they took a flight of stairs up to a class in school. It's very grim and very serious. I have this condition. I have, so in Germany we have these really old buildings, right, where I live. And when you open one of these doors, it's very heavy. Just by opening a door, I have landed in the emergency room. And so it's very serious. But the good news is there's medicine. And if you take your medicine, you're fine. You have a normal life. If I take my medicine every 48 hours, I'm totally fine. I can come to Zagreb, I can give talks, I can swim in a pool, I can, whatever. If I forget to take my medicine, I will for sure die. Also, the medicine is expensive. It costs this much. This is per week, over 10,000 euros. Now, in Germany, no problem. In India, where I was born, huge problem. And essentially, as I mentioned, you don't take your medicine after a certain amount of time, you die. That's the truth of it. So this is a problem that can be solved by modern medicine, but maybe can be helped by code. So I'm not a doctor. Maybe I don't have the intellect to do sciencey medicine stuff, but I am a developer. And so I'm thinking, what can I do to help myself and the hundreds of thousands like me? And so I said, well, let's build an app. Let's just build an app that can maybe help. Because as I mentioned, this medicine has a finite time period where it's effective, right? So my app was very simple. It looks like this. Forgive me if the contrast is very low. The lights here fight with the dark mode. But this is what the app looks like. It's a little donut chart, and it shows me very simply how much of this medicine that I have in my body at any given time. So I open the app, I look at it, and I know, am I healthy? Am I not? Should I take the stairs or should I take the elevator? It's a great way to make decisions. It shows me how much I have, and it shows me when was the last time I took my medicine. Very important information. I then click this red button here on the bottom. I tap it on my phone, and it asks me for some metadata, and I manually enter an infusion when I take my medicine. And then what happens is the donut chart fills up, and I have more. And it's just a visual representation and an approximation of what's happening in my body, but for me, it's amazing, because I'm able to know, should I go to the restaurant after the conference tonight? Should I walk, or should I take an Uber? This is it for me. Now, I built this with React Native, and I would show you a live demo, but it broke. and we'll talk more about that later. And so the screenshots are the best I can do. But if I wanted to build this app, there's many different ways to build apps. These days, I mean, we all have options. We have Kotlin, we have Swift, we have Flutter, and so on. But me, as Mattia mentioned, I was kind of born speaking JavaScript. Like 8 years old, I'm writing JavaScript apps. And so for me, the choice is clear. I know JavaScript. I love JavaScript. I have a deep respect for the web platform and web technologies. And so let's use JavaScript. But more than that, my reasoning for choosing JavaScript is because 2/3 of all developers all over the world, everywhere, in some capacity have used or will use JavaScript. It's like that language. It's like English, but for technology. Like most people kind of sort of speak it. And this is according to stackoverflow.com. And so if the choice is, well, let's use JavaScript, there's now even more options. Do I do it as a native app? There are ways to do that. Or do I do it as a progressive web app? The native app, I don't mean using something like Ionic or Framework 7 or Cordova, but I mean using React Native, which produces an app that runs kind of on the device. It's not a web view with a web page that kind of looks like an app. It is an actual binary app that uses JavaScript. And so let's talk about these in the time that we have together, and then we'll talk about trade-offs and maybe which one you should use for your use case if you have one. Let's start with PWAs. Progressive web apps. In essence, I was explaining, so my wife is not technical, right? She's a law student. She was asking me what a progressive web app is. And the best definition I can tell you is it's like a web app that you access from your browser that then you can save to your home screen. It behaves just like a native app. It has an icon, it gives you notifications, it works offline. The beautiful thing about web apps, though, is that they're built and run on the platform, the famous web platform. And they really are accessible because of that, and they enable some really powerful use cases and metrics. For example, Tinder, popular app, I mentioned it earlier already. They cut their load times from 11.9 seconds to 4.7, roughly, seconds with a PWA. That's an incredible improvement. And their app is 90% smaller than the Android app, 90%. And of course, because it's fast and small and easy, everyone's using it now. User engagement went up with PWA. Or how about this one? Uber, I used Uber last night, and they have a progressive web app, and they designed it with 2G in mind. And for this, I don't know how you feel about Uber, and they're an evil company or whatever, but they care about 2G people, and for this, I give them a huge round of applause, because we often ignore these, but most of the market are still running on 2G and 3G. And their app is only 50 kilobytes gzipped, and is just incredibly fast. And lastly, Pinterest. They rebuilt their mobile site as a PWA, and their engagements went up. It's kind of like magic. You build something as a PWA, people start using it more. Why? Well, because it's fast. And again, 44% increase in ad revenue, and time on the app went up as well. If you want to know more about progressive web apps, I highly recommend following Maximilian Furt. He's an excellent resource and just really is a wealth of information about this stuff. In terms of architecture, progressive web apps look like this in a convoluted setup. So you have JavaScript, you bundle it together, and then it's available everywhere. But really, we have ES modules kind of first-class supported in the browser now. So to be honest, you could even remove this build step, this bundle step, and it's a really beautiful, simple architecture. I'm a huge fan of progressive web apps, but they're not the easiest to implement perfectly. This is a subset. This isn't even the full checklist, but Google has a checklist for what makes a PWA great, and it is long, and you need to have a lot of attention to detail, but if you get it right, you see success. In terms of trade-offs, PWAs are great in that they just work on all devices for free. Like, you write your JavaScript, magic, it's everywhere. It's because the web platform is so universal. You can have a single code base for everything, for your web experience, your mobile experience, your tablet experience, your watch experience, and you use the tools that you know and love. If you know JavaScript, welcome to the world of PWA. You don't have to learn Dart like for Flutter. Like you're already there. You can use the web APIs, as we saw yesterday with AR here from George. Oh, sorry, not AR. The face recognition API. You could do incredible things with the web platform and turn it into a PWA. And lastly, you can use device features when they're available. So there's work being done by the W3C to support more and more device APIs, things like geolocation, things like the accelerometer, the gyroscope, the magnetometer. These are coming to the web, and so you can really hook into devices straight from the browser. The thing, though, about PWAs is they're a little bit hard to monetize, and that's mainly because app stores, one particular app store, just doesn't want to support PWAs. So if you want to monetize and spread the word, it's a little bit hard. You have limited access to the device APIs. That document we just saw from the W3C was from April in this year, and it's slowly coming, but not yet. You can't communicate across apps in a nice enough way. And I say this as one who's creating a health app. Apple has something called HealthKit. It's a sandbox for your health data. And apps can read and write information to it and from it. And so I want my app to integrate with it. As a PWA, I can't. I can't touch HealthKit. It requires lower level access. You have a UI UX inconsistency where the host system doesn't always look and feel like your PWA. And so that can feel a little bit odd. For example, iOS has this gesture where you swipe from the edge to go back. That's hard to reproduce on the web, and it may feel inconsistent. You need to support Chrome, Safari, Samsung Internet on Lollipop, Samsung Internet on Donut, on Jelly Bean, and browser support becomes a little bit hard. Moreover, Service Worker can be hard. And of course, because it's on the web, it's not kind of locked down without any access to the internet, and so security can always be a concern. And lastly, Apple hates you if you do PWAs. Like, I try to be a nice, positive person 99% of the time, but I am fed up with Apple, honestly. Okay, just calm down, breathe. Apple is awful, and I despise their lack of support for PWAs. Moving on. React Native. How many of you have worked with React Native? I'm sorry. I'm just kidding. I love React Native. I have friends who work on React Native. And there's a lot of people who use React Native. Skype, Uber, OneDrive, Amazon. Like, there's huge companies that are using and benefiting from React Native. Airbnb is not on this list, but still, in terms of architecture, it's a little bit, more involved. You write JavaScript that React Native kind of bridges the device and your code, and it's bundled together with this thing called the Metro Bundler, and it produces a binary for each architecture, each platform you support. Now, note here that there is no web compile target. And so traditionally, you would create a separate web experience and a separate native experience, and they'd kind of be a little bit different. Thankfully, there's some work being done in this space. We have React Native Web by Nicholas, talented engineer, and React Native DOM by my friend Vincent Reamer. And they kind of solve the similar problem, but in very different ways. So React Native Web will take your 100% React Native code base, and at build time, swap out native components for web components. What that means is in React Native, you have a view. It's a box. It's equivalent to a div. You have a text. It's equivalent to a span. And React Native Web, when you build your project, will swap out your imports from React Native to React Native Web and give you the divs and spans for the web. So you keep one code base, you can compile to the web. It's really nice. React Native DOM is so cool, but experimental, and probably don't use it in production because it takes another approach. Like, it uses your proper React Native app, but runs it in the browser. Like, Facebook implemented Flexbox in C++, and this thing compiles that to WebAssembly, and your layout is actually handled on some other thread. And it's just very experimental and great fun for learning, but I wouldn't build anything in production with it. A simple way of thinking about it is React Native Web is really web first, and React Native DOM is native first. And your mileage may vary with both. But these two tools complete the landscape. And with React Native, you can actually just write React Native and compile and deliver everywhere. So in terms of pros, you write React once, you can ship it anywhere, as we just saw. It's easy to monetize and distribute because, yes, you can create an app, a binary, and put it in the Apple App Store. They will accept it after a lot of review. You have more ready access to the device APIs. For example, one thing I can do with React Native and not with progressive web apps is use geofencing. Set up a zone on the map that responds to events when I enter or leave it. Can't do that with PWA. I can do that with React Native. I can communicate with HealthKit and other device-level constructs with React Native, so you get low-level access to some things. But the coolest thing is you can actually compile React Native as well for web and get a PWA out of it. So React Native could generate you a PWA. So this isn't even like React Native versus PWA. You could use React Native for everything. What's not so good is you have different APIs for different devices. And this really, really, really is very painful. Like, people describe this like the browser wars, but with like mobile phones now. Because you have to support things on iOS, you have to support things on Android, Jelly Bean, Marshmallow, Skittle, like all the different candies for Androids. Seemingly trivial tasks, like avoiding the keyboard when it pops up, is difficult. You need some knowledge of Android Studio or Xcode, which is hard. Like, if you've ever used how many of you have used Xcode? Again, I apologize. And lastly, wiring up your dependencies can be a little bit hard. Again, there's work being done in this space with the community. There's a company or I don't even know what it is. There's a thing called Expo. And Expo aims to abstract away that complexity of Xcode and wiring up dependencies. And it does a good job. So really, the list of cons becomes smaller. And if you weigh them side by side, it actually looks pretty good for React Native. But when you compare the architectures side by side, one is a lot simpler than the other. One is a lot simpler than the other. So now my question that I'm faced with, the question that we're all together faced with, is which one should I use? Should I use a PWA? Should I use React Native for my app? And really, it's the question of, should I use a PWA? But a PWA is really just the web platform. Or should I use React Native, which conceptually is not the web platform, but it's more an abstraction on the mobile layer. From my experience, the platform was infinitely, well, maybe not infinitely, it's too extreme, but the platform was significantly easier, simpler, because I know the platform, I know the standards, I know the specifications. The abstraction was a little bit harder because React Native does something extremely difficult. And you need to hear me, this is not complaining about React Native, this is not saying bad things about the team, but they're in the middle of something very difficult because when you build a PWA, you build on one platform, the web platform. React Native tries to balance two platforms that are currently evolving. React Native will balance the web platform and the mobile platforms. So it will have to work well with iOS, with Android, with everything. And the reason I couldn't show you the demo today was because of this. So I had the demo working. It worked in June. It was amazing. I was using my app. I started to get the demo ready for this talk. Did not change the code. The version numbers were the same, but it wouldn't compile. It just completely broke. Why? And that's because Apple had recently released iOS 13. The platform had changed. My dependencies didn't change. The platform changed. Because of that, my code base broke, and I need to rewrite everything from scratch. And so it's very difficult. And so the choice here, really, I would answer this question with the classic engineering answer that is the answer to life, the universe, and everything else. And it's not 42, but it's that it depends. Depends on your use case. What do you want? Do you want to integrate with HealthKit? Then maybe consider React Native. Do you want to build on the web platform and give people a really consistent experience? Well, then PWAs might be your thing. Ultimately, my friends, we make apps to solve problems. And I made an app to solve my specific problem. When you do that, it's all about trade-offs. So you see, I make apps for people who are sick, who are struggling with healthcare, who don't sit in a hospital bed thinking, does he use Webpack or Rollup? They don't care. We make apps for humans first. They don't worry about if we split our code, if we use React or Vue or Ember. We make apps to solve real problems for real people and solve them fast. And so when you're trying to answer the question, it shouldn't be which one's cooler, which one has better documentation. No, the answer is, how can I best serve humans as fast as possible and encourage them and make their lives better? And with that, I just want to say thank you so much for having me. It was an honor to be here.